Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the NTRA 2012 Road to the Triple Crown conference call. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Following the presentation, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. At that time, participants are asked to press star 1 to register for a question. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Wednesday, May 30th, 2012. It is now my pleasure to introduce your host, Mr. Eric Wing. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and welcome indeed to today's very special NTRA Communications National Media Teleconference. Today we'll be focused on the 144th Belmont Stakes taking place a week from Saturday, June 9th, and we will have a transcript and a podcast of today's call available at ntra.com. Those two things should be up in about no more than 24 hours from now. A little bit later in today's call, we're going to have the pleasure of chatting with some past winners of the Triple Crown during that golden era of the 1970s. Representing Secretariat will be his owner, Penny Chenery, and his rider, Ron Turcotte. Representing Seattle Slew, the 1977 Triple Crown winner, will be co-owner Sally Hill and Slew's trainer, Billy Turner. And of course, the most recent winner of the Triple Crown was 34 years ago in 1978. And to talk with us about Affirmed will be co-owner Patrice Wolfson and Affirmed's rider Steve Coffin. All the television action associated with the Belmont Stakes will be covered here in the U.S. by NBC and the NBC Sports Network. Just want to go over the schedule real quickly with you. On June 8th, NBC Sports Network will have a Belmont Classic show airing from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern, and then from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on NBC Sports Network is a live telecast that will include both the Brooklyn Handicap and the Jaipur Stakes here at Belmont Park. And then on the big day, Saturday, June 9th, NBC Sports Network will have the undercard stakes races on Belmont Day, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern live. And then the big show, the Belmont Stakes itself, on NBC, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern. And then NBC Sports Network will kick in at 7 p.m. with a special half-hour Belmont Stakes wrap-up. One gentleman who will be front and center throughout most, if not all of that, of those many hours of coverage is NBC's outstanding horse racing analyst, Randy Moss. And we're pleased to have Randy join us now. Randy, welcome to the call. I think it's fair to say the vast majority of eyes on June 9th will be on I'll Have Another. As you look at the race objectively, what do you see as I'll Have Another's primary obstacles to victory a week from Saturday?
Well, when you look at the 11 horses that have failed in the Belmont Stakes in their bid for the Triple Crown since Affirmed last pulled it off, you can see an assortment of obstacles there. I mean, first of all, I'll Have Another has to get up to the race the next week and a half in good health. He has to handle the mile-and-a-half distance, and he also has to deal with a growing trend in the Triple Crown, and that is those horses that run in the Kentucky Derby, then skip the Preakness Stakes to freshen up and lie in wait in the Belmont Stakes. We've got Union Rags, Dullahan, and Alpha, who were 3 horses that ran in the Kentucky Derby that are following that exact pattern. So there are no shortage of obstacles facing I'll Have Another, but clearly if he holds form and he runs the race in the Belmont that he ran in the Preakness Stakes, it's his race to lose.
Randy, one obstacle that you didn't mention was one that seems to have cropped up at least a couple of times in the last 10 or 15 years, and that's a rider's lack of familiarity with Belmont Park. To what degree do you think that could play a factor with jockey Mario Gutierrez?
Honestly, Eric, I think some of that is a bit overrated. If I look at the losers in the Belmont Stakes that were going for the Triple Crown since Affirmed pulled it off, I mean, my opinion is I can only conclusively point to one as being jockey error, indisputable jockey error, and that would be Spectacular Bid in 1979. when Ronnie Franklin set him out early after a hopeless long shot and just burned him up in the early stages. Spectacular Bid turned out to be clearly one of the greatest horses of all time and should have won the Triple Crown. I know some people are critical of Kent DeSormo's ride on Real Quiet in 1998. But to me, you give me a 4-length lead at the 8th pole, and I'll take it any day of the week. And it took a historic stretch run by Victory Gallop to run him down. And then with Smarty Jones in 2004, there are people who are critical of Stuart Elliott as well. But the horse was pretty keen going into the backstretch. It was a very slow opening quarter, and when the pressure got ratcheted up on him, the horse just got very, very eager, and I think Stuart Elliott had a choice of either wrestling with Smarty Jones or letting the horse do what he wanted to do, and I can't fault him for giving Smarty Jones his head and not fighting him. So I think that the jockey angle of it, as far as jockey air as it pertains to Belmont Park, has been a bit overrated. Having said that, I think Mario Gutierrez obviously needs to ride at Belmont Park to familiarize himself with the oval because it is unusual in that it's a 1.5 miles in circumference. The poles are all in different places. But he's a professional, and there's no reason to think that he won't be able to handle that.
Randy, before I turn it back over to Michelle for any media questions, I just want to ask you a personal question. The NBC broadcast crew that's assembled to cover the Belmont is not just a very deep and accomplished team, but also a very seasoned one. I mean, we're talking about people like yourself, Tom Hammonds, Gary Stevens, Bob Costas, Newmeyer, Battaglia, Rice, Brothers, etc., Jerry Bailey. For a day like June 9th, will you guys be nervous?
Probably when the horses are loading in the gate, there'll be a little apprehension. And I think it's not just because we're doing the telecast, but I think every big racing fan in America that wants to see a Triple Crown is going to feel some butterflies when the horses load into the gate. It's that apprehension of, what's going to happen. Is this going to be that historic moment? I mean, with Smarty Jones in 2004, with Big Brown in 2008, I kind of felt that way as well. So I think the butterflies are just mainly butterflies of anticipation as much as anything else.
And I guess you guys can take solace in the fact that, unlike Larry Collmus, you guys don't actually have to call the race. All right, well,
exactly.
Now that's pressure. Okay, Randy, this is great. Michelle, let me turn the call over to you now, and if any media members have any questions for Randy, you can feel free to jump in now.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question, press *1 on your touch-tone phone. If you're on a speakerphone, lift your handset before entering your request. We'll pause for a moment to assemble the queue. The first question comes from John White of HRTV. Please go ahead.
Randy, one of your strengths as a handicapper is pace, and based on the field that is currently considered probable for the Belmont, how do you see the pace for the Belmont?
I don't see it as being a Belmont Stakes, at least on paper, that would be abnormally fast-paced or abnormally slow-paced. I think, in fact, I think there's a good possibility that I'll Have Another is going to get a beautiful trip because you've got a horse named Painter, trained by Bob Baffert, who's coming off that dynamic allowance win on the Preakness undercard at Pimlico. He has speed, and then there's another horse in the race that's just joining the fray for the Triple Crown called Unstoppable You, who's also shown some speed in his 2 previous lifetime races. So Mario Gutierrez could just fall into a beautiful trip sitting third behind 2 speed horses, and if that happens, we'll just see if I'll Have Another is good enough.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you. The next question comes from Danny Brewer of Rutherford Reader. Please go ahead.
Hey, Randy, you talked about the butterflies and everything, but isn't that one of the things that makes this sport so great?
Oh, sure. I mean, I guess there are differing ways to look at it. It's a sport from a television perspective with a lot of build-up and very little actual action. But that's part of it. I mean, when you get to the Kentucky Derby, For weeks, we've gone over the relative strengths and weaknesses of the horses. We've spent hours on the air on NBC Sports Network and NBC itself, poring over the details of the horses and the storylines of the connections. So that by the time the horses are actually at the starting gate, we've had so much buildup to the Derby that it really ratchets up the tension level. So when you get to the Belmont Stakes and you have a possibility of a Triple Crown, I mean, that just heightens the anticipation to yet another level.
Talk for a second about Union Rags. Do you see any similarities between him and, say, Empire Maker that Jerry Bailey rode in 2003? Highly regarded horses that kind of disappointed but took the freshening period. Do you think he could be that horse?
Well, I mean, there's a similarity in that they both ran in the Kentucky Derby, were withheld from the Preakness to await the Belmont Stakes. When Empire Maker ran in the Kentucky Derby in 2003, even though he was beaten by Funnyside, you could make a strong case that he was the best horse that day, given the trip that he had. He had a very wide trip, and he was only beaten by about, I think, a length and 3/4 that day. Union Rags, on the other hand, did have some difficulty at the start of his own making. He broke a step slow from the gate, but he finished 7th and was beaten 7.5 lengths, so he didn't have the same kind of run in the Kentucky Derby as Empire Maker did. But when you look at these horses that run in the Derby and skip the Preakness to await the Belmont, losing by 7.5 lengths in the Derby and coming back to win the Belmont is no big deal. In 2000, Commendable was beaten 26 lengths in the Derby, skipped the Preakness and won the Belmont. Summer Bird beaten 15 lengths, Jazzle 9.5. Birdstone was beaten 15, Summer Bird was beaten 13. So we've seen quite a few turnarounds from the Derby to the Belmont in the last decade or so by horses that have been given that 5 weeks to freshen up.
Hey, I appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Thank you. The next question comes from Debbie Arrington of Sacramento Bee. Please go ahead.
On that same discussion, do you see any horses in this field that could upset I'll Have Another?
It just depends on, I think, on whether I'll Have Another runs the same race in the Belmont Stakes that he did in the Preakness. Mm-hmm. Historically, a surprising number of horses who ran in the Derby and Preakness and went to the Belmont with a chance to sweep the Triple Crown did actually come back and run their races in the Belmont, but they were just simply outrun by a horse who just happened to be better on that day at Belmont Park. I'll Have Another does have an advantage in that when you look at his entire 3-year-old campaign, it probably helps him that he was given a break between February and April, between his first start of the year and then the Santa Anita Derby. That maybe gives him a little bit more gas in the tank. But looking at all the horses in the field, I think the horse with the best chance to beat I'll Have Another would be Union Rags. I mean, I'm going right back to the horse that I picked in the Kentucky
Mm-hmm.
Derby, and a horse that's definitely been an underachiever in his last couple of races. But the way he trains, the way he looks, you still obviously have the feeling that there's a lot more there that we just simply haven't seen yet this year from Union Rags. And then Painter, mm-hmm. Trained by Bob Baffert, is coming off that very impressive win at Pimlico. And if he were able to control the pace with a very comfortable early lead in relatively leisurely fractions, which you'd have to think would be at least a possibility, then he could prove to be very troublesome as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question comes from Mike Brunker of NBCSports.com. Please go ahead.
Hi, Randy. Much has been written for a long time now about horse racing's general decline in popularity and that right now we've got a lot of other turmoil going on around the sport. A lot being written about drug use and the situation in New York and elsewhere. How much can a Triple Crown, if this one comes to pass, kind of reverse that whole trend and get people to take a fresh look at the sport and really kind of, make a difference?
A Triple Crown winner certainly wouldn't hurt. but I'm not of the opinion that it's going to be a panacea for all the various ailments that thoroughbred racing has right now. It'll help in the short term because it obviously will give the sport some positive publicity that it hasn't been getting much of in recent weeks and months. But the fact still remains that thoroughbred racing has some work to do to improve itself, not only in the public eye, but also administratively, et cetera, to regain the public confidence. And hopefully that's something that the sport will tackle on a nationwide basis.
Great, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. There are no further questions at this time. I'll turn the conference back to Mr. Wing.
Okay, well, Randy, very good of you to join us on this call and share your thoughts with us. And we wish you and the rest of your colleagues on air there at NBC the very best of luck with the task you guys have at hand, and that's coverage of the 144th Belmont Stakes. Appreciate your participation today.
All right, Eric, take care. We got a nice lineup for Saturday for the Belmont show. Got a lot of pretty interesting, very interesting features, including one on the background of Mario Gutierrez in the very dangerous part of Mexico that he's from, El Higo, Mexico. So that'll be something people want to tune in and watch as well. It's going to be fun.
All right, it sounds like it. Thanks again, Randy. That's NBC racing analyst Randy Moss. He just mentioned the feature they have on Mario Gutierrez. In fact, this Saturday, Univision will have a segment on Gutierrez on their regular news magazine show at 7 p.m. Eastern. They talk more about this young jockey's rise from relative obscurity in Veracruz, Mexico. That'll be on 7 p.m. Eastern on Univision this week. And, of course, Randy, again, will be joined on the NBC telecast of the Belmont Stakes by star-studded crew Tom Hammond, Gary Stevens, Bob Costas, Bob Newmeyer, Mike Battaglia, Jake Privman, Kenny Rice, Donna Barton Brothers, Jerry Bailey, Lafitte Pinkai, and last but not least, track announcer Larry Kalmus, who will be calling I'll Have Another's attempt at history. And just want to let people know that NBC Sports will have a conference call next Monday afternoon with other members of the broadcast team. Time is still to be determined next Monday, but Adam Freifeld over at NBC will certainly let everybody know ahead of time on the time and dial-in details as we get closer to Belmont Stakes Week. Okay, now I have the privilege of doing something that we get to do from time to time when circumstances warrant, and they certainly warrant this year, and that's a chance to visit with some of the rare few who have actually experienced Triple Crown success. With us on the call right now is Penny Chenery, the owner of Secretariat, her rider Ron Turcotte, who was aboard during that unforgettable Belmont Stakes victory by 31 lengths. We also have a pair of the Slew crew with us, Sally Hill, co-owner of Seattle Slew, and her trainer Billy Turner. And also from Affirm's camp, we have Patrice Wolfson and rider Steve Coffin. I welcome all six of you to today's call. Thank you very much for joining us. And my first question is to Penny, and I'm going to not risk offending everybody by going in chronological order of your Triple Crown successes. So I'll start with you, Penny. Great to have you on, Penny. And
thank you.
In 1973, Secretariat broke what seemed like an interminable 25-year drought of Triple Crown winners. Now we're in the midst of a 34-year drought. Do you feel that the Triple Crown has become somehow harder to win since the golden age of the 1970s?
Yes, I think it has, because of the reasons for which we breed horses. Back in the 70s, we were still breeding horses to race them, and so much of the industry now is concentrated on sales, and so you breed a precocious, good-looking, early speed horse who isn't equipped to go a mile and a half or to run 3 hard races in 5 weeks. We just have a different set of goals with the horses that we breed now, and it will take a remarkable individual to complete this. I happen to think that I'll have another can do it.
Okay, so we've got 1 vote in favor of I'll have another winning so far. Let's move on. Thank you, Penny. Ron Turcotte, much has been made about the fact that Mario Gutierrez has never ridden at Belmont Park. You know that track's layout as well as anybody alive. To what degree do you think I'll have another is at a disadvantage because of his rider's unfamiliarity with the track?
I don't think it'll be no problem at all. I watch Mario ride, and he's a very cool rider. Use his head and move at the right time. His horse is relaxed, and I think he can place him pretty well where he wants to. And I really like the horse. I like Mario riding him. I don't think it'll be no problem at all whether he rode on the track or not. But I guess it'd be some advantage if he did ride a few races before. But regardless what he's going to ride, it's not going to be a mile and a half anyway, because they ride very few races going a mile and a half anymore. It's the game has really changed. We used to run 2 miles. Now they don't hardly run a mile and a quarter or a mile and a half. They do by running a mile and a half a lot on the grass, and the horses seems to handle it all right, but you see very few on the dirt.
And which is part of what makes the Belmont Stakes extra special. Sally Hill, it seems absolutely absurd to be saying this now, but once upon a time, Seattle Slew was viewed by some as a cheap yearling purchase who perhaps wasn't worthy of having his name alongside legends like Secretariat, Citation, and the others. Do you feel a bit of a connection with the I'll Have Another group given their horses' humble beginnings?
To tell you the truth, I really hadn't thought that at all. A horse makes his name and makes his pedigree, and we certainly were very fortunate with Seattle Slew that he did step up, and not only was a really great racehorse, he carried that right into the breeding shed. I just had never thought of it that way. Certainly, you're exactly right. There were a lot of people who said by his breeding and the fact that we only paid $17,500 for him, he really couldn't and probably wouldn't run as well as he did.
Well, I guess that's why they run the race a week from Saturday. We'll all find out. And Billy Turner, welcome to the call. And I know from reading Daily Racing Form that you had an extended conversation with Doug O'Neill just yesterday, I believe. Can you share with us some of what you guys discussed and any advice you might have given Doug as he prepares his horse for an attempt at history?
I must admit he impressed me. He asked me the questions. He asked me the same questions that I asked the people in Kentucky when I went down there for the Derby, because I wasn't that familiar with Kentucky and how they do things in the racetracks and all that. And Doug wanted to know the ins and outs of training on a mile and a half race course, and he wanted to know if he could use the paddock in the morning and things like that. And they're all little things, and what I thought of the gate crew, and those are the right questions. And he's very astute, and he's covering all bases. So he's taking this thing very seriously.
All right, and thank you, Billy. And Patrice Wolfson, for the last 34 years, it's been affirmed who has held the honor of being racing's last Triple Crown winner. Will a part of you, even a very small part of you, be disappointed to lose that special distinction should I'll Have Another win a week from Saturday?
Hello, everybody. I tell you, I think this horse has a lot of tenacity. He really loves to run and looks like he wants to win. And he looks like he would be a good successor if it comes about. There were times I didn't feel as though we were ready to relinquish it. But maybe the time has come now. And I certainly think racing needs a horse that will bring a lot of excitement. And this little guy, I think, can do that. I watched him gallop on television, and he sure strides out beautifully in his gallops, and he can be very exciting.
Thank you, Patrice. And Steve Cauthen, thank you as well for being on with us. Even though you were only 18 years old at the time, you already had a reputation back then of being completely unflappable in the saddle. And that's one thing that's impressed a lot of people about Mario Gutierrez, who is relatively inexperienced probably compared to the riders he'll be in against, but he certainly has not shown any nervousness before, during, or after his first two Triple Crown rides so far. How important is that ability to kind of zone in for a race that has as much on the line as the Belmont Stakes?
I think it's very important. And as you said, I think that Mario seems to have his head on his, really level-headed guy. As you say, I guess if you grew up in Mexico, this is nothing. Probably some of the stuff that he went through when he was a kid or saw. And so, I know from just reading some of the interviews that, he's very close with, some family and some certain friends. I guess some of the people that he got acquainted with up in Hastings. And, just having the attitude that, he can only do his best, give 100%. And I think he's also said he, has 100% confidence that the horse will, and, go out and give it your best shot. I think that's a great attitude to have. I know, obviously, he'll think it through and try to figure out how best to ride his horse where he'd like to be. But, of course, when the gate opens, that can all change in a heartbeat. And I think it's also so important that, Doug O'Neill and Mr. Redham, obviously are, full of confidence in him. And knowing that was very important to me. Having the Wolfsons and Laz Barrera's total support, made me go into the Belmont knowing that I was their guy, and all I could, they just expected me to do my best. So I'm sure he'll do great.
All right, thank you, Steve. And it's time now for you and the media listening in with us to have your turn. Again, we're joined by Penny Chenery, Ron Turcotte, Sally Hill, Billy Turner, Patrice Wolfson, and Steve Cauthen. We do ask that due to the large number of media members we have on with us listening in, that you limit your questions to one per guest, and also do be mindful of the, as I said, the other media members who are queuing up to ask a question. And with having said that, let me turn the call over one more time to Michelle, and she'll check in with the media for their questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do have a question, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone at this time. And I would like to remind our guest speakers, please state your name when answering the question from the media. Our first question will come from John White of HRTV. Please go ahead.
First of all, thank you to all of you Triple Crown connections, Secretariat, Seattle Slew Infirmed, just how great that we had those horses, and for all that you've done in racing. This is for Penny Chenery and Ron Turcotte. When Secretariat won the Belmont Stakes, I'm sure the crowd was going crazy. We see that when we watch the race back. So I'm thinking that at the time, Penny and Ron, you really were not aware. Of course, Ron, you were pretty busy on the horse. And I'm thinking that you didn't get to hear Chick Anderson's call of the race, especially with that phrase, he's moving like a tremendous machine. So I'm just wondering what your thought is of that call by Chick Anderson of Secretariat's Belmont. And first, if you could go